First question I ask is, well, why do I need a will? What's the purpose?
Yeah, so it's necessary to have a legally binding wills. I know that a lot of people, generally the younger generation, don't think it's very necessary to have a will, but accidents do happen, and we have seen cases where someone doesn't have a legally binding valid will, and so it becomes an issue when you need to administer the person's estate. So obviously a will comes into effect when the will maker passes, and so what the will does is that it outlines the manner that you want your estate to be distributed and who to look after your estate, so your executor and your trustee of your will. And like mentioned, in the case that you do not have it, the court will need to appoint an executor and trustee, and you may not want that person who the court appoints as a person looking after your estate. So we always recommend that, irrespective of your age and your circumstances, it's important to have a legally binding will so that your estates and wishes can be distributed according to your wishes.
So does it make it take longer if you don't have a will to get matters settled?
Yes, that's correct. So if you don't have a valid will, I'll kind of explain the process of when you do have a valid will first. So when you have a valid will and upon your passing, you have to, so the executor and trustee of your will obviously contact a firm, or they can do it themselves if it's not such a large estate. But generally we recommend that you do see a solicitor where they apply for grant of probate. So that goes to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court will grant the probate to the executor and trustee named in your will. And so then the solicitor that you've appointed to look after the estate can obviously look after the administration of your estate.
Right.
In the process, yeah, so in the process where there is no legally binding will, obviously it's a longer process because, as mentioned, you have to go through the court, and the court will have to determine who's fit and who's the most best person to look after your estate upon your passing. But like mentioned, it can take up to months longer if you don't have a legally binding will.
And I'm sure that's the last thing you want to be struggling with, after some loved one has passed away, to have to go through
Yeah,
the process and uncertainty.
obviously it's a heightened emotional time, and obviously it's not something you want to be going through, to the court, getting documents together when obviously it's a difficult time when someone's passed that you care about. It's very hard to to think logically, especially when there's emotions involved. And so that's why with having a valid will, then that way it can eliminate some, at least some of those tedious processes of going to court.